Hi everyone, I hope you guys are still doing good and you guys are still following. We will now be moving on to activity 5 and activity 6. So, activity 5 states that the following figure shows the equilibrium rate of return when capital stock is employed. They ask you to select the correct options in the paragraph based on the figure, right? So what you can see in this diagram is that you have four lines or four graphs on there, but there's basically two types of curves. You have your total utility curve, which indicates the trade-off of current consumption for future consumption that will yield the same total utility. And then the further away from your origin that the total utility curve is, the higher the total utility you will derive from that trade-off is. Right. And then the next curve you're looking at is this one over here. And this curve basically indicates the technical possibilities of trade-offs of current consumption for future consumption. And then we will now be going on to the paragraph. The paragraph reads that at point E is this point over here. At point E, the rate at which individuals are willing to trade current consumption for future consumption is equal to the rate at which they can be technically traded. Point D is an optimal point, but individuals can do better by moving towards point E. And that's because of the fact that you have this tangency over here. And at a point of tangency, you know that the rate of willingness will be equal to the rate at which they can be technically traded. And then point D is a point on the curve, and then everything that is on the curve is optimal, but because of this tangencies, this is the most efficient point. And then tangencies that occur at relatively equal values for future consumption and current consumption will exhibit a positive rate of return. The rate of return plays the same role in a two-sector period model that relative prices do in the model of allocations within multiple periods. And then that would be all for activity 5. Activity 6 now basically is looking at this curve over here. It says that the following figure shows the effect of a lower tax rate on capital-driven revenue, and it shows what that effect will have on the firm's desired level of capital inputs. And then based on this figure, you will have to answer questions the same as you did in activity 5, right? And just to break down the curve again, you have this isoquant over here, which is associated with this MC curve. And then you have the second isoquant, and that is associated with MC2, right? And you basically, in the scenario, basically be looking at how tax rates or changing in tax rates will lead to us moving from Q1 to Q2, right? And the scenario starts off by saying the initial rental rate on capital is RR, and the firm produces Q1 by using CA1 units of capital per period. So what that is telling us is that we're looking at this curve over here. And then if you have a decrease in the tax rate, the first impact would be a decrease in the rental rates of capital. And because of this decrease in the rental rates of capital, you will have more capital being used in the production process. And therefore more capital will be hired. And because of the substitution effect or substitution of capital for labor, well, basically for us using more capital in our production, we would have an upward movement on Q1. So as of right now, we are still on Q1. We had this decrease in the tax rate. This decrease in the tax rate reduced the rental rates of capital. And when the rental rates of capital reduced, we were able to use more capital, therefore use more capital in our production processes and less labor in our production processes. And therefore you had that upward movement on Q1. We still have not moved from Q1. We're still on Q1. And because of the fact that we are using more of this cheaper capital stock in our production process, the marginal cost of producing will decrease, right? Will decrease, and hence you have this downward shift here. Remember, marginal costs shift in a similar way to the supply curve, where this way indicates a decrease. And because of this decrease in marginal cost, you can produce more. And as a result of the output effect, you will have even more capital being used in the production processes and less labor, right? And now just to explain what that means. Remember, while we were still on Q1, we started using more capital, which is much more cheaper, right? And therefore, the marginal cost of producing is lower, right? And when marginal cost is lower, you can afford to produce more. Therefore, output will increase. And this is known as an output effect. And this output effect will lead to us moving from point B over here to point C. And at this point, you see that there's even more capital and less labor than we had. And that's basically the whole movement and the whole process. I hope you guys followed and understood, and I hope you guys are okay. If you guys have more questions, then you are welcome to consult with any of your tutors, with your personal tutor. I